So we got an adventure coming today. So what are we doing, Pearl?
We're gonna go wildlife viewing, hopefully see some.
Hopefully. We see something other than something.
There was some
Pelicans?
pelicans.
Something other than a Canadian goose and a duck. That would be good. Mainly Canadian geese.
Yes.
I kind of like ducks. Canadian geese, no.
Just kind of distance as best you can. Because we are a Coast Guard inspected vessel, they require that I do this. My name is Bill. I'm going to be the captain today. Captain Mike is going to be doing the narrating for us today. It's like it's going to be a pretty day, so that's a good thing. A couple of things. Adult life jackets are located underneath the seats. Children's life jackets are back underneath the bench if needed, okay? We also do have a TED or a bathroom back there if you need it, no problem. It's just a porta potty. So. If we are no smoking, no vaping vessel. So also we have fire extinguishers located, one forward and two aft. Our fuel tanks are above deck. So if we do need to exit the vessel, we go over the sides or out the front. Okay, never happened to us before, and hopefully never will again. If we have to don a life jacket, here's a good heads up: go feet first, because a lot of places are only 3 to maybe 4 feet deep. Okay, so if you go head first, you might hurt yourself. With that being said, main and most important thing, when we are leaving the dock and coming into the dock, I want everybody's body parts inside the vessel, because we use these pylons to bounce off of. That's what they're there for. We do have a little wind today. Hopefully we won't, but you never know. So keep your hands, arms, legs, everything inside the vessel. With that being said, we are waiting on a couple people. We're not going to wait too long on them, but anyways, like I say, once again, I'm going to turn it over to Captain Mike. He's going to be our narrator today. And sit back, enjoy yourself. If you see something, let us know, because we don't see everything, okay?
Wait a few minutes, see if this other folks show up. If not, we'll push off and get started. Want to reiterate the main thing. Body parts inside as we're leaving. Once we leave the dock, you guys are more than free to move around the boat. Come up here on what I call the dance floor. Sometimes a dolphin like to ride in the wake. Just try to distance as best you can. Do the best you can. For the smaller children, really important, like I said, fingers, arms, heads, things inside. I'm okay as we go. Get out here. For them to stand up on the seat, but please don't let them climb on the rails. Don't want to lose somebody overboard. Okay, we haven't so far. Let's not start the day. Other than that, we'll wait a few minutes and we'll be ready to go. And I'm going to use this microphone so you can hear me. Does everybody hear me okay? Is that too loud or is it good? Is it good? Even in the back there, it's really good. Yeah, all right. Sir, could you step into the head and make sure you can hear me? I'm joking, of course.
I think I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
All right, now that we're away from the dock, you're free to move around. You hang your head over, your hands over if you like. Just stay in the boat. Like I said, for the little ones, just don't let them climb up on the rails. Other than that, it's okay. So I'd like to thank you for coming out on our tour today. We have a beautiful day, it looks like. Nice breeze, a little bit of cold breeze, but the sun is warm and it's clear. And the water is not in a froth, so that's kind of nice. So you're on a tour called In Search of Wildlife. The operative word here is in search of. So I'm not going to bring the animals to you. You have to find them. I will point them out, tell you what we're looking for, tell you where to look, and what we see, what we don't see is pretty much up to them. I worked Monday and Tuesday this week though, and there were a lot of dolphin around. But that was before the front came through, so hopefully they're still around pretty thick. You'll be able to tell. All right. Does anybody have any questions before we get started? No? All right. I usually like to start by just letting you know where we are, where the tour is, where you are located. I know you come from all around the country, different places. You're, of course, in Florida. If you don't know that, you're really misguided. But anyway, we're in the Banana River. This river here is called the Banana River, and it originates north at the Space Center. It's about 13, 14 miles north of here. It's not, they call it the Banana River, but it's really more of a thin bay. It's more of a bay. It doesn't go through. It does flow south, about 13 or 14 miles south of here at a place called Dragon Point, which is where Merritt Island ends. And there the Banana River meets up with the Indian River, which is where the intercoastal is along the west side of Merritt Island. Now the Indian River runs south all the way really to the no-name harbor in Miami. Then it runs north above Merritt Island. Merritt Island is kind of a peninsula. It runs north above Merritt Island, and it connects on the east coast with a place called the Mosquito Lagoon through a place called the Fallover Canal, the Mosquito Lagoon. Mosquito Lagoon is really the south end of the Halifax River, which is around the New Smyrna area, New Smyrna, Bethany area. So those three bodies of water comprise our Indian River Lagoon. So you're taking a trip in the Indian River Lagoon. You're in the Banana River of the Indian River Lagoon. You're also in an estuary. So we'll talk about that. So we are a lagoon first because of its definition of a lagoon. A lagoon simply is a shallow body of water that's surrounded by the outer, deeper waters by a barrier island or a reef. For us today, the barrier island is Cocoa Beach. We'll talk a little bit about Cocoa Beach as we go, but originally Cocoa Beach was just a strip of sand running north and south along our eastern seaboard. It has since been built out, and we'll talk about that. But that's our barrier island, which makes us a lagoon. So this is all considered a lagoon, the Indian River Lagoon system. Our lagoon is protected by the Atlantic Ocean, and we have two openings to the ocean, really deep water openings. North of us, above the Mosquito Lagoon, is a place called Ponce Inlet. That's at New Smyrna Beach. So that's a natural deep water inlet to the Atlantic. It's about 60 miles, 57 miles north of here. South of us, the next natural deep water inlet is Jupiter Inlet, which is about 100 miles south of here. So that's the extent of our lagoon, roughly 60 miles to the north at Ponce Inlet, and then south to Jupiter Inlet. It's actually 157 miles as the crow flies. Now, we're also an estuary, and the definition of that is very similar to lagoon. It's a shallow body of coastal water, but it's neither salt nor fresh. So we're in brackish water. And we're in brackish water for the reason that most of Florida has, is all of our fresh water comes from the Florida aquifer. There's a limestone cave structure underneath Florida that's part of the natural geography, and all our rainwater and our freshwater runoff from the Appalachians and the Smokies, that's where the watershed is for us, collects in the aquifer, and we get our fresh water from there. Because of pressure from the land, again, pretty much all over central and southeastern Florida, we have a lot of springs that spring up from underground, and you'll probably visit some of those on your stay. You know, Alexander Spring, Silver Spring, Salt Springs. We got lots of springs, but they bring fresh water up to the surface. That's no different than here. So we have springs underwater. We have springs on land. Where we build housing, we have to relieve the pressure. A little bit later, you might see fresh runoff into the lagoon. And then up at the Space Center in particular, there's some large springs. So we get a lot of fresh water, which makes us brackish water. That's important to us in one particular area, because I know some people here probably want to see, and you guys want to eat some alligator too, I know. You have to eat some alligator while you're here. Tastes like chicken. It really does. Although I would argue chicken tastes like alligator. Alligator's been here 65 million years, but not so the chicken. So I would argue the chicken tastes like alligator. It is very good. Anyway, we're not going to see an alligator today. Alligators are freshwater creatures, and in general down here the parts per million in salt is too high for them. Salt causes them to get salt in their scales, it causes sores, lesions, so they pretty much stay away from it. They might be in salt water for a short period of time going from point A to point B, but then they got to find fresh water and clean up. So the best place to see alligators is if you go into west St. John's River, take an airboat ride, or go out on the golf course. You might see one really close if you go get your golf ball out of the water. So you'll see those. So we won't see alligators.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Now north in the Space Center, north of here, above 528, the beach line, there's a lot of large alligators up there because that salt line tends to vary a little bit. But I have never, and I don't know anybody who's ever seen an alligator down here. It's just too salty for them. So I mentioned we're an estuary, brackish water. Very diverse, very large. This is one of the largest estuaries in the northern hemisphere. About 2,200 square miles of shoreline. So we have a lot of life, plant life, bird life, animal life, and we're going to see quite a bit of that today. We're not going to spend too much attention to the underwater life other than the dolphin, which we have here. The manatees we probably won't see. We haven't seen one in a few weeks, a month now, because the water's getting too cold for them. They like to go back up towards where the springs are, coming out of the water, or the power plants along the shore. When the water gets below about 68 or so, the manatee gets unhappy. He actually can get sick, and sheds his skin. It's kind of like ick on a fish, the same kind of thing. So they're not very tolerant of cold water. The natural springs in Florida always come up at about 72 to 74 degrees. So they look for those springs, or they hang out at the power plants on the main river. The power plants cool the machinery with water. There's a warm water outflow, and they'll hang out there. So we're very unlikely to see one today. Not saying we won't, but we're unlikely to see one. But we'll probably see dolphin. Last couple of trips I've been on this week, there were a lot of dolphin around. And then a bunch of bird life. Point out a little bit of our flora. We're going to pay a lot of attention to this green stuff on our left. But we should see great blue heron, blue pelican, anhingas, double-crested cormorants. We should see the little, what's called the lesser blue heron or little blue heron. We may see a little green heron. We might be lucky enough to see a kingfisher. We will see a number of egrets, perhaps, osprey, perhaps ibis, maybe a roseate spoonbill. So there's a lot of bird life here. This area is very rich in bird life. We won't see a lot of it until we get a little bit further south where you see these islands as we get out of this more trafficked area where the marina is. But keep an eye out. If you see something, feel free to interrupt me and point it out so other people can see it. You guys have a whole lot more eyes than I have. To our right is a seagull. We have a couple different species of seagull here, 3 or 4 of them. I only know one distinctly. The others are just common seagulls to me, so sorry. So this is to me one of the common seagulls. And the way to tell is the black beak, the whitish head and the black beak. Oh, I'm sorry, take that back. That's called a ringbill. But the white head, and if you look at him, his beak's not black, it's just the tip is black. It's called a ringbill. They tend to be the larger seagull. When we see what I'll call the common seagull, the other varieties, they tend to have an all black beak, tend to have a grayish to white head. That distinguishes them from the others. These are ringbills right here.
Didn't know that.
I'd like to call your attention to our left. We kind of alluded to it a little while ago. This green stuff on the left is called mangrove. Okay, we have various subspecies of mangrove here, white, red, black, but predominantly we have a lot of black and red mangrove. Now the mangrove is really, really important to our ecology here, without which there would not have been a barrier island here to begin with. The mangrove grows in shallow water, and its main purpose, really its main purpose, as far as that is concerned, is to hold the land to prevent erosion. The black mangrove is this low-lying bush-type structure out on the water. Comes up, grows as a bush, stays kind of compact. And then this bigger bush that grows up is the red mangrove. And if you look at it over here, it looks like it drops tendrils back into the water. It looks like it grew up and now it's trying to come back into the water, it's dropping down into the water. So that's the red mangrove. So the two of them grow up from the ground and have that root structure, but then the red grows back. What have we got here? Oh, it's way up there. Pelican yeah. Yep, we'll be seeing a lot of them. But so that red mangrove comes back down and grows into the soil, and it creates an interlocking root structure that helps prevent erosion. So that's one of its primary purposes. It's also our large sponge. It's a filter. So if you look around the shoreline of the mangroves, for about 5 or 6 inches along the shoreline, you see a different discoloration along the root structure. That is salt incrustation. The mangrove sucks the water up, and in doing so, it absorbs salt, which gives it that incrustation. But the important part is, while it's doing that, it's cleaning the water around it. It's a big filter, a big sponge. So runoff from the land that have nutrients that are harmful to the lagoon, the potassiums, the nitrates, things like that, the mangrove actually sucks that stuff up. Between the mangrove and our filter feeders, our clams and our oysters, they help keep the lagoon clean. So that's another purpose. The other thing it does is pretty obvious. It's a home to the small creatures. It's where the food chain starts. Small crabs, shrimp, small fish, they all live and born and live in there, eventually come out. They feed the larger animals. So we're going to pay in a lot of attention to the mangroves. The mangrove is so important to our ecology that it's protected by law, both state and federal law. It is a federal offense to cut the mangrove or move the mangrove or play with the mangrove. You can't tie up to it. You can't go in it. You can't play with it. That's a no-no. It's a very serious fine. We'll continue moving south along our barrier island, Cocoa Beach, and we'll start talking more about animal life as we get up to these islands. Off to your left in the mangroves, you see a bird right here. Sitting up in the mangrove, he's drying himself, got his wings out. That's called an anhinga. This is one of two birds that we're going to see that have the same behavior, but they're different. There's the anhinga and the cormorant. Hopefully we'll get a chance to see them up a little bit closer. They are different. They look different. Most people don't know that because they behave identical. These are the birds you normally see in the water with just their neck or their back out of the water. They're very low in the water. And the anhinga in particular can look like a snake in the water. They're fish eaters, they eat fish, and they're swimmers, kind of like a loon. They get underwater, they swim down, get their prey, and come back up to eat it. Now the reason they're so low in the water is most aquatic birds like ducks, or swans, or geese, they have a natural oil in their body, and when they preen themselves, they put that oil, they shed that oil on their feathers. That allows them to bob on the water, to sit on top of the water and kind of float free. They can sleep on the water. They're not expending a lot of energy just staying on the water. The anhinga and the cormorant, for whatever reason, don't have that. So the reason they're low in the water when they're fishing is they're sinking. They don't have that oil to keep it buoyant. So as they fish, they get sodden, they slowly sink, If they don't get out of the water, they'll drown. So when you see them up on the pilings or up on the seawalls or up on the mangrove with their wings out, it's not that they're warming, although that's part of it, but they're drying off. They have to get out and dry off periodically. So we'll be watching for them in the mangroves. When they're in the water, we might see them, but we usually can't get very close. They'll duck under pretty quickly. They don't hang around very much. That smells good. Is that edible? Here's one of our cormorants in the water now. See, he's very low in the water ahead of us. Now he'll duck under. Got a couple osprey right here and a couple pelicans. We'll see more of them later. You can hear the osprey. Like I said, we'll see more of them, but the osprey, you'll normally hear them first. They're flying around. They're fish eaters also, the fish hawk. They're almost always in pairs. They mate for life. So they get together, they mate for life, and this time of day, one or both of them is probably out fishing for their dinner. This is a good example of the red mangrove, drop it back into the water, and the black mangrove lower back behind it. What you see behind you looks like snow. It is winter, but it's really salt. With the high winds, we've had some wave action, and that just causes the salt to beat up into a froth. That's all that is, salt froth. Salty froth. You hear the osprey, you usually hear them before you see them. One of our brown pelicans, and I'm going to show you many more. Talk more about them when you get a chance to get a close-up in their face, or their beak, I should say. We're going to go into the islands here. We're going to see a lot of them. These are the first four. These are called Four Sisters Island. I have no idea which sisters they're named after. They're just Four Sisters Island. And they're good examples of what we call a manatee, or excuse me, a mangrove hammock, or a marine hammock. Hammock is an old word that means dry land. There's the osprey right up on the top of the tree there. Good large one. Watch for the second one. There's always a pair. But anyway, these mangrove islands are natural. It's a great blue heron up in front of us. We'll see more of those. They're called hammocks. Hammock is an old word that means dry land, place of dry land. But the maritime hammocks, if you look back in there, they're not really dry. They're kind of a wash. That's what the mangroves do normally. They live in shallow water. They grow. They eventually collect soil over time. But when they're young, they're just a wash. It's just mud and muck back in there. But they provide habitat. These are the Four Sisters Island. The stakes out there are oyster beds that we have. Oyster beds, they're planning, it's a new program to reintroduce oysters into the river. They were harvested a long time ago. There weren't very many oysters, which is one of the reasons we're trying to improve the water quality. Oysters are filter feeders like the mangrove. A single oyster, can filter 50 gallons of water a day. So we're reintroducing the oysters to help clean up the water. So we'll look at these mangroves, these hammocks for our birds. Some of the smaller birds will be back inside, right around the roots. And then some of them will just hang up here, up on top. So pay attention to that. This island we're getting ready to come up to is very famous for the pelicans. They really seem to like it. However, right here off to our right in front of us, you see a great blue heron. The big great blue heron, before we see the pelicans. That's a nice example of the great blue heron. You're looking at a male great blue heron. If you look at him, he's got the feathers hanging down on his chest. That's his mating plumage. And he tends to have a small barb in the back of his head, a black barb. That helps you distinguish the male. Like a lot of birds, you can't be absolutely sure if they're not in their plumage. But in this case, you can tell. Oh, there he goes. The great blue heron. Now we'll start seeing the pelicans as we get around this island here. Now all the white snow you see in these trees is not sea foam. That is pelican snow. So here we have the pelicans, great blue. These are the brown pelican. We have various pelicans here. The ones that come through here are brown pelicans. If you notice, most of them aren't brown. They're kind of a gray and a bluish color. The brown pelican is brown when it's young, up to about 2.5, 3 years old when it molts. So if you see a pelican that's very brown, especially along the back of his neck and head, he's still young. He's a juvenile pelican. As they get older, they lose the brown. Their necks turn white. And then as they get older, they start getting that yellowish coloration on their nape of their head. Yep. And then as they get even older, their beak starts to turn orange from the outside in. So you can tell the relative age of these pelicans by their color. There will be a few brown ones, but most of these look like they're a bit older, senior citizens like some of us.
You need smell-o-vision.
Yeah. We'll see a lot of them. Pelicans, you've seen them, I'm sure. They fly around, and they like to dive into the water and catch their prey. They dive pretty fast, so they hit the water pretty hard. If you look at the pelican right out on the front of his chest, That thing there, he blows that up. That's called a gull. He blows that up in his chest. It's a big airbag. So when he dives into the water, he blows that up and he hits the water and it helps protect him from the impact of the water. And he takes in the fish that he was diving after, comes up, he gets about 3 pounds of fish in water in his gullet, and then he squeezes the water out, swallows the fish, and goes back and does it again. All of our bird life here, including the pelican, is migratory. Some of them will stay all year long, but in general they're migratory. The pelicans are almost exclusively migratory. They don't breed here. They just roost, but they don't do their breeding here. All of these birds come from South America, Mexico, Central America, migrate through here in the spring. Most of them head pretty much all over the country, and then they come back in the fall. The pelican stays along the shore. Most of the brown pelican end up for the summer in the Jersey Shore and the Carolina shores, come back here in the fall. We'll see a number of pelican. This is a very popular place for them to stop over on their way to and from the Southland. If the weather stays fairly warm, they will just stay here. They're too lazy to fly south. Why should they? A little bit further south before we really have much of a chance of seeing dolphin. The dolphin that we have here are the blue dolphin, just like Flipper, the Atlantic blue dolphin. There's about 400 of them in our lagoon, and they are born, live, and die here. They're not migratory. This is an area, this particular area of our lagoon is an area that's a training ground for them. The mothers raise their young here. So it's a breeding ground and training ground. They tend not to be in these places where the wind is blowing hard against the shore. They'll be in more still waters as we move south. So while we're making that movement south, we can talk a little bit about Cocoa Beach. As I mentioned, there was basically a barrier island along A1A, which is off to our east, back behind us. And then it had to be built out. There wasn't enough room for the people. So Cocoa Beach as a township originated, or the idea originated back in the 1880s after the Civil War. Some men bought the tract of land and they wanted to create just a rest and relaxation area. The townships on the mainland already existed. So they built Cocoa Beach and it finally incorporated as a township in 1925. Everything's fine, hunky-dory, but nobody could envision the space program at that time. The space program started picking up here in the mid-50s and a lot of development started happening. There wasn't room for the program itself and to house the people that needed to live here. So the land you're looking at, not enough people could have lived along that barrier island. There's only 5 acres of arable land. The whole tract of Cocoa Beach originally was only 15 square miles. 5 acres, 15 square miles. 5 square miles of land. The other 10 square miles of land were underwater. So this was all water at one time, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So when we had the space room, they started building all this. They said, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to house all these people? So we built the land. This is all man-made land. So from the, excuse me? No, sir, they didn't truck it in. What they did is they dug out where we are now. These canals were all dug out to deposit the spoils from dredging onto the land. Now, some of the land was here. There were shell middens and things like that from the native people who lived here before, the Ais people. But this was all built out to the west. So the natural barrier island is up and down the seashore, and all these canals that we're going to see today were built out to the west to accommodate all the people that were moving here because of the space program. So they started the township in 1925. By 1960, well, take that back. They started in 1925. By 1939, they had 49 permanent residents. Not very big. By 1960, not even 30 years later, there were 3,000 people living here. They didn't have the room. By the year 2000, which was kind of considered to be the height of the space program, before the shuttles flew out, and now we're coming back, like 13,000 permanent residents over here on the beach. So it's quite a high density living area, even today. But it's a big engineering feat to build all this land and turn all the water into land by dredging these canals. And we're going to see a dredge operation later. We have to continuously dredge so they don't silt in. Now the big seawall we're getting ready to come up onto is a very famous, or I shouldn't say famous, a favorite one of the dolphin. They like to train right along in here and teach the little ones how to fish. Partly why these folks are sitting out here, they're waiting for the dolphin. And then we'll look to see if we see any great blue herons like to hang around with the dolphin are too. When the dolphin are fishing, one of their techniques, they have several techniques, but one of the techniques is to drive the fish, herd the fish ahead of them, herd them into shallow water, or in this case a seawall, and the fish have nowhere to go. So they have to turn around right into the jaws of the dolphin. So they teach their little ones to do that. But sometimes the fish also jump. They'll jump to get away from it, and they'll land on the grass. So the herons and the egrets sometimes take advantage of that. You'll see them along here so they can pick up the leavings. I don't see our heron right now. Normally he's up by that fence line, so the dolphin aren't feeding right now. No matter, we'll probably see him a little later. The big white building to your left, that's a Cape Royal building. That's on the east side, the beach side of A1A. So that gives you an idea of where the barrier island is in relation to all this that was built out to the west. Did you see one? Oh, yeah, there's a dolphin right there. There's one right there. He's jumping out of the water. Look at him. It's pretty cool. So you can't tell me you didn't see one now. Successful. We can go back now. Oh, there's two right here coming up at us. You're free to move around. Two dolphins swimming right at us. Now, whether they'll go into the boat or come to either side is a question. Keep an eye out. See where they are. I can see their footprint. They may come up behind us too. Oh my God, they're all around us. They're in the back. Couple dolphins there. I saw two. There might be more. That's right. They were coming right at us. Keep an eye out for them. Where there's two, there may be a few more. And they're heading towards that seawall, I think. So like I said, these are the Atlantic blue, just like Flipper. They travel in small pods, families, they call them pods. Around the world, in many places, they can be very large pods. I've heard of pods with as many as 1,000 individuals out in the Atlantic Ocean. Now here in our lagoon, they've adapted to the smaller area in the shallow water. And they tend to be in much, much smaller pods of 3 to 5 individuals. I guess we're okay.
Yeah, be careful with the pond.
What happens here is back in this canal off to our right, they're doing the dredging, and they have a pipeline that's running up the canal over here across the island. We'll see it a little bit later. Sometimes it can air in it, and it'll rise up to the surface. So his job is to let us know if there's a problem with the pipeline being in the way. Normally it's not.
For the dolphins.
The props? No, there's no concern. No,
What about the
manatees, no. We move very slow. Right, and we can talk about that while we're at it. So the gentleman's pointing out that they see manatees with cuts and whether that's a problem with their pond. He's no gentleman? Okay. This jerk right here is talking about. Okay. Anyway, so yes, the manatees get run over from time to time, and they do get scarred with the prop. That typically does not hurt them too much. It's like us getting a cut; it will heal. The cause of death of the manatee mostly is boat strike, but it's blunt force trauma to the head. They're kind of slow, and the reason we have slow zones for the manatee is to slow the boats down so you're not speeding over the surface. You're speeding over the surface and you hit the manatee in the head. If it knocks them out, they sink, and they're mammals like us. They have to breathe. So if they sink, then they will drown. That's the number one cause of death. There's about 6,000 manatees in all of the state of Florida, 1,100 of them in our lagoon. As of April of this year, we lost 300 manatees to boat strike. That's a third of the population. That's why it's very important. Just a smart jerk, a real smart jerk. Okay. Well, she's the one that said he wasn't a gentleman. That's not me. Oh, okay.
I can tell.
Oh, your enemies call you. Good. Okay, to our right on this piling now, this is the cormorant. Take a look at him. His neck is not as long. It's kind of thick. Ooh, fella can hit the water. Kind of a short tail. And if you look at his beak, it looks like there's a little hook on the end of the beak. That's the cormorant.
Now that was a show.
Yeah, that's a good show for you. I just snap my fingers and he does that. But that's the cormorant. That's a double-breasted cormorant. Now, when we looked at the anhinga, it was harder to see, but hopefully we'll see another one. He's almost the opposite as a cormorant. It's a very long, thin neck, a very long, sharp beak, very long tail. Looks like you took the cormorant and stretched him out, made it more streamlined. That's going to be the anhinga. I don't see the footprints. The great blue heron. Watch for them. This is where they should be. This is where we saw them the other day, and they were very thick. They were all around the boat. Oh, there he is, right here, to our right. He's heading north, right here. And he's in the shallow. The water's clear enough to actually see him underwater if you've got some UV glasses, polarized glasses. There he is. Right here. There's two of them. Now, I mentioned that they travel in small families. The male dolphin is aggressive and territorial. He tends to run alone. He stays by himself, except when he wants to get frolicky with the females. Okay? Now, like us, the dolphin has a curious thing is sometimes he frolics for fun. It's not just for procreation. But he's so aggressive to get to the female, sometimes he can attack or separate the baby, the calf. So the dolphin run in pair. When you see pairs like that, it's a mom and her baby. Obviously, mom is raising the baby, but her other job is to protect the baby from the males, especially if the baby's also a male, because then you get a territoriality issue going on. So the males are very aggressive, and they can hurt or even kill the baby to get at the mom if he's feeling frisky. Very few, small ones only. Great blue heron up to our right. We do get them in here, but they're very small. We're so far from the ocean, except for the few that might come through the locks at the port when they're open. We don't get them. Exactly.
Those dolphins. You didn't
Yeah.
get it? Okay. I think I missed it with the picture.
Well, that's right. In fact, the group back here was saying they're going to do a shark tour. And on Cape Canaveral, if you go to the ocean side, you can take a boat and go do a shark fishing and stuff like that, catch and release. But on the ocean side, there's quite a few sharks in there. But Cape Canaveral, or Port Canaveral, I should say, comes through. There's a set of locks to prevent the erosion, and they're normally closed. The sharks normally don't get back down in there. There's no reason for it. So there are a lot of sharks on the ocean side, but they don't tend to get into the lagoon much. And we're 100 miles one way and 60 miles the other way to the ocean. So I was saying is the females protect the babies. That's their job. And the way it works in the lagoon is those pods are family pods. They live together in a family unit called a pod. Here in the lagoon, they tend to be small because of the shallow water and the distance. They're not really big pods. 3 to 5 individuals, let's say. When you see a pod, more than one dolphin, unless it's a male and a female, and there's a lot of commotion, you'll know. But if you see a small pod, it's going to be females and babies. Always females and babies in the same family. So you have the mother, the baby, and then you'll have either the nursemaid or the midwife, we call it. That's another female that helps protect and raise the baby. Or there may be a couple females. Normally 3 to 5 here. Now the interesting thing about that is her family units. So it's mom, the baby, and that midwife that's with her, that helps her raise the baby, is her mother, her sister, her daughter, her niece. She's related to her by blood. And they're small family units. See if you can get closer to the shoreline over here. This big island we have here, the big hammock, actually has dry land. It's a much more mature hammock. It's been around longer. And up in the pine trees, we'll be looking for a lot of our roosting birds. Now the pine trees are Australian pines. They were brought here in the 1880s to provide windbreaks for the citrus groves. They grow very quick, block the wind, but they're also very poisonous. They are what's called an invasive species in Florida. We're trying to eradicate them, but we don't want them from the shoreline. As you see back in there, they fall down. There's nothing growing under the pines, including the mangrove. If the pines pollute the soil where nothing can grow, and particularly the mangrove, then there's nothing to keep this island from eroding away. So that's why we're getting rid of them. But they provide good habitat. Here's Mr. Senior Citizen. If you look up here, I'm going to try to pull out 2 nests that should have herons in them. Anyway, show you the Australian pine. It's okay to go up on these islands. They are what they call EEL, Environmentally Endangered Lands, so they're protected by law. You can go up there but see nothing but footprints. And if you don't know what to do, I suggest you stay off of them, because we have snakes, forest snakes, rattlers, moxen, raccoons, possums, ticks, I mean all kinds of funny things, black widows, white recluse, brown recluse spiders, kinds of things that will bite and harm you. Those trees are all right. You can see the pelican up there, but there's a nest back behind it, and there's a great blue heron in the nest. See his head sticking out to the right. There's actually 2 blue herons. I take that back. There's 2 blue, and 1 is in the nest. Right there, two great blue herons up in that pine. And then we've got a bunch of pelicans over here. The nest is back behind us just a little bit. Little? Yeah. Yeah, these are pelicans here, the brown pelicans.
You knew that one
look
up.
at that little lid he's out there on. That pelican is good size. He can have about a 6-foot wingspan, but they're very light. Can anybody guess how much they weigh on average? 4 pounds. I heard 4 pounds. 4.5, 5 pounds on average. 8.5 to 10 maximum. They're very light. They have a hollow bone structure, so that allows them to be very, very light. So we can sit out on these little limbs. And sometimes they're growing off too. So there's a bunch of them out here. They're like these. Now here's a couple right here. There's another great blue heron in the big nest right here. And then the one below it is an Nico. These 2 birds we know are Nicos. Look at the long tail. There's one there with the fawn color. Long tail, a very long neck, very sharp beak. Most people think they're cormorants, but I pointed out the cormorant earlier. If you now that you know, they look very, very different. Although they behave the same, they're both that fish eating bird that likes to raise the water. It's even swimming water. All the right is pelican snow every poop. Now here, up here, the first, second, third one to our left, notice how brown he is by the others. So he's a relatively young pelican. He's still brown. Probably less than 3 years old, maybe 2. Actually, he's very brown. He's probably younger. He might have molted out this past spring. He hasn't lost much of that brown at all. Most of the, oh, here's another juvenile over here, but most of the other people are older. The juvenile pelican. And up on this dead tree, as we will see, back in the back is an osprey. That's the osprey. In that dead looking tree, that's the osprey. We do. Not so much down here. We have eagles. They're more up on the north end of Merritt Island. They're more dry land. They eat rodents and things like that, whereas the osprey eats fish. So we don't generally see eagles here because it's not what they eat. But we do. We do have them. If you take a Space Center tour, they'll probably want some nest time.
Oh.
Did you want to sit down? They moved.
Okay. No, he didn't.
Now the osprey, it was asked whether we had eagles here, and the answer is yes. But down here, the osprey is our apex raptor bird. He's top of the food chain. He's a raptor. The definition of a raptor is nothing more than has a sharp talon or a thumb backwards in his feet. What makes him a raptor is like us is articulated. His talon is articulated. Only two birds in the raptor family have an articulated back talon. That's the owls. The owls do that too. And it allows them to catch the prey and manipulate the prey so they can fly and make races. And they don't have to just kind of eat it on the spot like most of the other birds do. They take it with them. So he's a raptor. He's called a fish hawk. He eats fish. What he eats here mostly is mullet. The feed food fish here is the mullet. Kind of a medium size, a very oily fish, kind of like alewife or menhaden. And that's what we'll see sometimes jumping out of the water. The osprey has very, very good eyesight. You usually hear him as he's flying high. He's looking around. He's really kind of hovering, he or she. Looking, he's got very good eyesight, can see through the water down a couple feet, picks out his prey, tucks in his wings, and he dives for the water. Just before he hits the water, he turns, grabs his prey with his talons, and off he goes. In a dive, he can be very fast. He can hit the water at about 35 or 40 miles an hour. Although they've been clocked to dive as fast as 100 miles an hour. Which is the next question. Does anybody know what the fastest creature on the planet is? Yes, sir. Anybody else? The fastest creature on the planet. He knows. Yeah, right. It's the peregrine falcon. It's not the cheetah. The cheetah can sprint to 90 miles an hour, but the peregrine falcon in the dive has been clocked to 200 miles an hour. Kind of hard to get away from it. They are. They do migrate. They will range all over the country where there's water. Chesapeake Bay, out west, the Great Lakes, and they'll come back through here and the weather starts getting cold. All of the birds migrate all over the country as far as I know, other than the pelicans, which tends to be along the seashore, and the anhinga, not the cormorant. The cormorant you'll see anywhere, but the anhinga tends to be southeast, as far up as maybe the Carolinas, and then out, southeast, east of the Mississippi. Watch for the great blue heron. That's a great blue right there. Yeah, right by that fence line there. Great blue heron, big male again. Now the great blue heron is the largest heron in North America. He stands about 4 feet tall. Again, he migrates from the south, comes through, and he ranges pretty much all over the country, all the way up to the Pacific Northwest during the year. And he'll come back through Florida and then off to Mexico, South America, and the Isthmus for the winter months. He mates with his female. You saw them in the nest earlier. He doesn't mate for life like the osprey. He mates for the season. It's called seasonally monogamous. So he'll commit to his female for 1 year. That's it. Done. Then they don't even take new vows. So he's a very good nest builder. What attracts him to the female is his nest. He arrives first. His job is to build or refurbish the nest to make a really, really nice nest. The osprey's kind of like that too. Build a really good nest, and the female chooses her male not by how fancy he is, whether he's got a Corvette or a big bank account. She just wants a good home for her babies. So she chooses him based on his nest. A little bit of plumage. She's got to have a little bit of bling, right? But so she chooses him, and then they will mate, stay together, have their babies in the spring. And they'll stay together for the year. They'll head out late April, May timeframe. They'll leave here and be all over the country, and they'll come back in the fall. Then they'll usually, I'll say there's exceptions to the rule, they'll usually split, and then two will come together again in the spring, and it's not typically the same male and female. It's called seasonally monogamous. Whereas the osprey mates for life, as does the eagle. They mate for life until one of them dies, you know. So we're still in the banana river. All the bananas kind of dropped out. They're on the bottom right now.
Am I on your way?
No.
Usually the bananas float all over this river. You just pick them up and eat them. I said I could make some lies. But this is a good time to talk about that, because we did have a banana plant back there, a mango plant. We see papaya. And if you look around here, you see a lot of trees and stuff that are both tropic and northern, like the white oaks, the live oaks in the back here, which are northern, mostly Panhandle, Carolinas, Georgia. And then if you look around here, you also see a lot of coconut and palms. Palms are not native here. They don't grow in Florida natively, other than the sago, which I'll point out. So these other big palms, big tall palms, that are the coconut palms, they come from further south. They were brought here and transplanted as ornamentals. And then we have a lot of northern trees, even the Norfolk pine. You can see some of the Norfolk pine. People like that. The osprey really likes the pine. But they're normally Virginia, North Carolina, places like that. We live in a unique weather pattern here. It's called the Intertropical Convergence Zone. So we get something like the tropics, but not quite. We get something like the north, but not quite. So we live here in a place that's about a 100-mile band, about where the lagoon is, where the weather pattern is different. So we have much richer diversity in plant life. You bring your favorite plant from up north, it doesn't need to freeze, bulb or something. It'll probably grow fine here if you plant it and take care of it. If you come from Mexico and you bring your favorite plant up here, it'll probably grow. So there's quite a bit of variety of plant life within the lagoon barriers, boundary.
As far as the water and the ecosystem, does the hurricane hurt it or help?
It helps flush it. The question is whether the hurricane, in terms of the ecosystem, helps or harms the environment. In general, it helps the environment. It helps flush the water, makes things move, but it can also, of course, damage homes and take out trees. So, it's kind of it depends. But in general, it helps flush the water, keep things clean. Yeah. Yep. One of the problems with the lagoon is we don't have a lot of flushing water. There's not a whole lot of water movement. And we have no water table here. It's not like we have a tide. The tide varies here only by a few inches, and it's mostly wind-driven. Because our openings to the ocean are so far away, we're not affected by tidal difference. Yeah. It also makes the water murky because you don't have that cleaning action. But that murkiness also what brings the diversity here. There's a lot of invertebrates down in here. There's a lot of different fish. There's about 600 different species of fish that we have here, small to large, and the plant life. So the estuary is not clear. You probably have heard that if you get a body of water that's deep and clear and clean, it's not generally healthy water. It looks good, but in terms of life, in terms of its biology, it's not healthy. You want cloudy water in terms of biological health, because that means things are living there. Yep. A lot of plankton, which starts the food chain. Some more pelicans to our right. And off on this piling we have another cormorant. Short tail, hooked beak, a little bit fatter, less lengthy neck, kind of stocky. They behave the same, he and the anhinga. They are completely different subspecies in the aves family. In fact, they're not even related. It's an example of what's called convergent evolution. We see that in places like the Galapagos, the tri-tortugas, where because of the environment, different creatures are evolving to have the same look and the same habits. So the anhinga and the cormorant are examples of that. So we're still following the coastline. This is all Cocoa Beach off to our left. We're entering into an area that's a little bit older. You'll notice the homes tend to be single story, a little bit older looking, a hip roof or not much of a roof line. Those are the building codes of the day. Most of these homes date back to the early 60s, late 50s, early 60s, into the 70s. After the 70s, there were some new building codes, building techniques that allow us to build higher, larger homes with different roof lines. You know, not a nailed on trusses, for example. We have straps, different things that we do. So these homes are all single-story block construction for hurricane protection. Concrete or block. So we see all the coconuts, we see the bananas. We have some of these shorter palm trees. We are very tolerant in Florida. We realize some people are shorter than others. As you notice right here, for that reason, we grow some of these short trees. Those are for shorter people. Nobody here looks to be challenged that way. You can do the big trees, okay? A great live oak, the big oak in the back. The characteristic of them is they grow up high and then they grow back into the soil. There's some very, very big ones up in Georgia if you're interested in that. A place called Hopwell Plantation has the largest oaks that I'm aware of. They have two oaks. One's the Ophelia oak, and I think its circumference is probably about half the size of this boat. It's huge. It's called the Hopwell Plantation. It was a plantation back in the day. Then it started growing rice. Then it became a dairy farm until Miss Ophelia died back in the 70s. I think 74. I mentioned earlier we get the water from the aquifer in various ways, and one way I mentioned was runoff. If you look at this house right up front here, there's actually what looks like they left their hose on. You know, there's a pipe coming out of the water and it's drained. That's artesian water out of the Florida aquifer. Because of pressure from the land, especially where there's housing, they put pressure relief valves in the ground. So they leave it open so that as the water table comes up and creates pressure, instead of flowing and creating a sinkhole or damaging the property, it allows the pressure to run off, and then we get fresh water that way as well. That's a great place to watch for manatee in the summer months because they like the pressure water. They like to hang around the pressure water. We have a cormorant. Oh, he'll come back up. We have a cormorant over here off to our right's fishing. You'll see him pop up every now and then. There he is. And you can see he's very low in the water with his head out of the water. When he comes back up, he won't stay down too long, but
See him?
there he is, back down. There's a heron back. I can't hardly see him now, but he's right back in there. If you guys can see him, a little further out. And I can't tell what type he is. Looks like a great blue. This is a good place to be looking for a smaller heron. Looks a little bit like a great blue, but he's about 18 inches to 2 feet tall. It's called the lesser blue or little blue heron. He's not just a baby great blue, it's an entirely different subspecies. Subfamily, I should say. And this is a great place to see all the mangrove islands out here. This is an area called the Thousand Islands of Cocoa Beach. There's really about 157, 160 islands out here. There's 900 acres of these little mangrove islands, all protected. Really very, very, very large area and very popular with kayakers and canoers, paddle boarders, fishermen, very shallow up in there. Other than the channels that we're in, most of the water up here is like mid-thigh to mid-chest deep. In some places, less than a foot or two. It's very shallow. So it's very popular for those activities. Here's an anhinga, first a pelican, then an anhinga. Here's a chance to look at the difference between the anhinga and the cormorant. So we have a brown pelican that's still young, he's pretty brown. And then next to him is the anhinga. Look at the long neck, long beak, long tail. Look at the very different than the cormorant. Look at him in flight, very different than the cormorant. I told him we were coming to do that. And they're a young pelican right there. They're not usually that bothered by us. But we're entering into an area where we actually have the mangroves on both sides. Up till now, we've always had seawall, which is a little bit deeper water. We're going to have the mangroves on both sides, so we have shallow water on both ends. It doubles our chance to see things. This is where we're likely to see some of the smaller egrets and some of the smaller herons. That little blue heron that I was telling you about, the tricolor heron, the green heron, maybe even a night heron. They're much smaller, they're harder to see, they stay back up inside the mangroves. Then there really aren't any predators for the birds other than like osprey perhaps, and owls maybe they'll take chicks for example or take eggs, but there's really no predators for them. Watch for the footprints. There'll be a boil in the water where it's hitting it right through it in here. There's a footprint, just like a little metal foot. Probably been another, he's probably come along here. There you go. Right over here. Come on, buddy, go right over. Now that looks like it's a large single male. Atoms, maybe. I'm not sure. He had gone over to the other side. Look for a little boil in the water with the foot. That's called a footprint. Something's swirling right here, but that looks like fish.
So that was likely a male?
Probably. He's by himself. He's pretty big. It's probably a male. The baby, it was a female, though. What if a cat? I usually stay pretty close to them. They breed about every 2 to 3 years. They fish for about 13 months. So they're almost always on a baby. Well, you do, but it's not typical. Because she'll be in some group with some other females of the baby.
204.
Very rare to see a female by herself. Whereas the male is with the one that plays on his own. Now the dolphin we had here, like I said, they're the Atlantic blue. They can get quite big. That big male, the bull male, can be about 13 feet long, which is the width of this boat. Now obviously we're seeing much smaller ones here, but they can get to be quite large. They weigh about 600 or 700 pounds. So they can live about 45 years. That old female has been known to be in the 60s years ago. About 45 years or so. Same with the manatee. That's about the same age. Heard a chime. When they breed like that, we call that chirping. They come up, they blow. They're mammals, so they breathe air. They come up and breathe air. See some egrets back up in here, as opposed to just the herons. Egrets are pretty easy to pick out from the herons. The general rule of thumb is egrets are white and herons are not. So there's some other differences to vertical on their neck, things like that, but in general, if it's white, it's either an egret or down here it could be a juvenile with a blue heron. Most birds are dark colored when they're young, and if they're going to be lighter or white, they do that later when they're old. The lesser blue heron is a little backward. She likes to be white when they're young, and then get that blue-gray color as it gets older, so you can confuse them for an egret. Yeah, so a good area to listen for and see some osprey. We're coming into a bay up ahead of us. It seems to be a good hunting ground for the osprey. I'm not seeing the egrets.
Did you get it?
I don't know.
The little trail on your left there, that's called an alligator slide. So I mentioned the alligators are freshwater. On the other side of that slide, there's a freshwater pond. The alligators are in that. They do come over here. They have to get back and forth. So there may be an alligator here. But when you see those little slides, and that's not some fisherman's trail, it's called an alligator slide. It's how the female gets up and into her nest. So my recommendation is when you come along these, if you visit some of the areas that we have where you can hike, keep an eye out for that. You see a nice trail that leads right down to the water, be very careful. There may be an alligator slide. They are very quick. Alligators can move quite quickly. Forward, not backward. They don't move backward very well.
I heard if they come at you, you go zigzag.
Zigzag. They don't turn very well either, but they are very fast. Don't run straight. If you can, get behind them and then zigzag. Of course, the best thing to do is have a friend with you who's slower than you. That always works. That's exactly right. I think that works for bears and stuff too. Here's an osprey right here off to our right. If you take a look at him, it might be hard to see because he's a long ways around. The difference between him and an eagle is an eagle has a white tail. They both have a white head, so they're distinguished that way. The osprey also has a white chest, where the eagle typically does not. Now he has extremely good eyesight. It's really hard to see right now, but he keeps moving his head back and forth. What he's doing is he's getting our approximate distance. He's triangulating. He does that math in his head. I mentioned he also has very, very good eyesight. If you look at the osprey, his eyes are black right in here. Those are his sunglasses. You watch football players, they put that smear under their eye to reduce glare. The osprey does the same thing. He's got that black band around his face, around his eyes, to reduce glare and improve his eyesight. So he triangulates his prey, moves his head back and forth, a little bit of triangulating, can see very well, picks out his prey, dives for it, and is a pretty good fisherman. He gets them probably 9 out of 10 times. There's his mate right here, his or her, one of the two. There's always two, or more. They could have babies in the spring, but there will always be two. Amongst themselves, maybe if they take it back to the nest. Most of the time, no. They'll go up to a pole or something and eat it. But if they have babies, they will take it back to the nest. And then the mother does what other birds do. She'll eat it, regurgitate it, feed the babies. The Nanhinga in the mangrove right up here to our right. Just sitting there quietly. right there. Now the word anhinga is interesting. Like I mentioned, the anhinga in particular, unlike the cormorant, when he's in the water and low, it's a very thin neck, looks like a snake out of the water. The word anhinga is actually a South American tribal word that means snake bird. So that's exactly what it means. Here's a brown pelican, still kind of brown. Oh, those were planted put here by the Ice Indians back in the 1500s. They're protected by law, of course. No, they're just people that put the wind chimes out. It's kind of neat. They're all over these little islands. Yeah, that's right. Which I've alluded to that, though, that the native people that lived here when the Spanish arrived were the Ice Indians, AIS, pre-Columbians, post-Columbians. But the Spanish first arrived here in 1513, Ponce de Leon, to explore the area. And those were the people who were here when he arrived. He explored a lot of Florida to the Panhandle, up into the Mississippi Delta, and eventually went back to Spain. He didn't get as much gold as he thought he was going to get. He was followed in 1565 by Hernando Cortez, or excuse me, 1539 by Hernando Cortez. Pretty much the same thing. Explored, but he went much, much further up in the Mississippi Delta and way back up in there. And he actually died here. He died of disease here. He never returned to Spain. And we had two explorers that were important here. St. Augustine to our north, great town. If you have time to visit that, I really recommend it. Castillo de San Marcos, and good food and things to see and do. It's really interesting. But St. Augustine was established in 1565 by a guy named Hernandez. 1565, he established St. Augustine. St. Augustine is the oldest continuously inhabited city in the United States, 1565. Not the oldest town in the United States. Does anybody know which one that is? St. Augustine is not the oldest city. No, ma'am, not Savannah. Much further south. Much, much further south.
It's the one down in the Keys.
Further south.
Saint something down in the Keys.
Further south. San Juan, Puerto Rico. When Puerto Rico became a territory of the United States, that became our oldest city. The Spanish were there. That was their base of operation back in those days. The British were in Port Royal, which is Jamaica, down in Jamaica, and the Spanish were in San Juan. Makes for an interesting Florida history. A couple of tidbits that they don't learn about. One, for example, the British owned Florida for quite some time. The 20-year period after the 7 Years' War, which started 1756, the British overran the Spanish. They took over Florida as a result of the end of that war. They were given Florida in exchange for Cuba, the Philippines, some other places around the world. So for 20 years, this is British Florida. That's interesting. The other part of that is there were two Floridas, not just one. The British turned it into East and West Florida, the Panhandle being West Florida, and this would be East Florida. Which brings up the next interesting question. So at the time the United States seceded from England, how many colonies were there? 15 colonies. There were 15 British colonies. Florida remained loyal, but there were two British colonies, East and West Florida. The 13 colonies we hear about just happened to be the ones that left England. Florida remained loyal until the Spanish took it back for us with the siege of Pensacola. Arguably the last battle of the Revolutionary War, actually fought by the Spanish, only battle they fought. They didn't do it for us, they did it for them. But in doing so, they pretty much tied up the British, and the British had had enough. The last British garrison of the Civil War was in Pensacola. And when they did the treaty in Paris to end the war, it forced the British out, and Florida reverted back to the Spanish. So it was British for a period of 20 years during the Revolutionary War, or before and after. We're still following Cocoa Beach. This is all Cocoa Beach. We're getting down towards the south end of it, actually to where the original Cocoa Beach was. Cocoa Beach really originally was down this way where we are now, and it eventually grew north and south. I'll point that out a little bit better as we go, but as you start visiting the area, driving around the area, there's an east-west road down here called Minutemen Causeway. Minutemen, not Minuteman, Minutemen. Okay, Minuteman is a guy with an arm, fought in the Civil War. Minuteman is a missile, and the people who take care of those Minuteman missiles are called Minutemen. So the road here is named after the Minutemen who launched the missiles. But anyway, that's an east-west road, which is the 0 street for Cocoa Beach. All the streets are numbered north and south from there. And then, of course, the newer ones have names, but 1st Street, 2nd Street, 3rd Street all starts off Minutemen Causeway. Looks like the Dolphin aren't as active as I would like today, but we saw some. There might be some. There's a cove around the corner here that tends to hold dolphins. Maybe they'll be there. The land we're seeing ahead of us, a little bit to our right, that's Merritt Island. That's the south end of Merritt Island. When we first started, we talked about Merritt Island being kind of a peninsula, pie-shaped peninsula, and it runs down south about 13 miles from here to a place called Dragon Point, where the two rivers meet, the Indian River and the Banana River Wind. This is what's called South Merritt Island. Historically, this was all plantations, citrus and pineapple. At one time in its history, Merritt Island was one of the leading exporters of pineapple. We had, as happens in so many places, there was a freeze in the late 1800s, 1896, 97, pretty much decimated the citrus and the pineapple crop. Citrus recovered, not to its heyday, but it recovered. Pineapple really didn't. So we don't really have any commercial pineapple groves here now. Indian River citrus originated here. This is where it comes from. Captain Drummond came here in 1807 from Barbados, and he established a plantation a little bit further north, up closer to New Smyrna, on the north end of Merritt Island. That became Indian River citrus, which is still in operation today.
Is that the assembly building?
Excuse me?
Is that the assembly building?
Yes, right off to your right, that's the VAB. A very large building. It's the world's largest single-story building. That flag on the side, which you can barely see on the left side, is the size of a football field.
Oh, wow.
And the American flag on it, each of the stripes, you could drive a bus up the stripe. That is about 16 or 17 miles from here. Quite a large building. While you're here, I would recommend the Space Center tour. If you haven't done it, it's very, very good. Not cheap, but it's well worth it, and it's not something you can do anywhere else.
You know how shut down things are over there?
I think they've opened up, but they may not be doing the Saturn V Center yet. You have to look at that. If they are, you want to do that. That may still be closed. Right. The bus tour.
Yeah.
Okay. It's still a great thing to see. The Atlantis is there. The shuttle exhibit's there. And the rocket garden's very interesting. They have a bunch of old rockets.
Yeah.
All right. This is the bay. We want to look for some more dolphin right in here. They're normally along the seawall. And they're here because I mentioned this is all pretty much shallow except for the canals. Back behind you, this water out to our right is very shallow, except for canals that were dug out to provide access between the markers. Because that's deeper water, the dolphin transit back and forth through there to this bay. So this is their favorite training area for now. We'll watch it with them, stick through here. If not, our next chance to see them was to get hit the bridge. The bridge. So now we're approaching where the original Cocoa Beach was. This is where it really kind of originated. The dock back behind us there over to this large tree on the other side is where the original Rip Bridge existed and connected the mainland, well, I should say that island, with the barrier island. And then there was another bridge on the other side that went over to what is today Cocoa Village. Another place to visit while you're here, right? This is a great restaurant. What we're going to do here pretty soon, is we're going to take us out to the west, take us out this east channel. We're going to pick up the main channel all along the east shore of Herren Island. We're going to pick up speed to feel the awesome power of the vehicle. And it's 150 million pounds of thrust. So we're going to take off. But I'm going to be quiet for a little while because you won't hear me a little bit anyway. And then we're going to, when we get up towards the bridge, I'll turn the microphone back on and we'll continue our tour. Hopefully around that southeast side of that bridge, especially if there's any bait fish coming through, we will see a lot of dolphins back in there. And we'll resume our tour from then. All right? So you're on your own for the next 20 minutes or so. It's a good time for a nap.
High frigid. High frigid. Look at that hair flying. I took a mine.
Yeah, me too.
So put the microphone thing away and put your arm around it.
There's a dolphin. Right out there. I think. Right there. Right there. You see it? We kind of get it.
I got it. 235.
Saying it's too shallow for us to get up in there. There's one here, but there's some deep water on this side of the bridge, so this is a good sign. They might be coming back and forth under this bridge. Where you see the ones in the back there, it's a bit too shallow for us to go. I saw a bubble right here.
Yeah.
I think my jacket off.
Yeah,
It's so
you like
hot.
water.
That's true. Well, I'm kind of trying to be here. I don't have that.
All right, I don't have to say wakey wakey. Everybody's up.
They're still out there swimming around.
You see him?
Yeah.
Yeah. So off to your left, you can see the VAB back up in there, Vehicle Assembly Building. That's Kennedy Space Center. There's two spaceports here. Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, or actually it's not a spaceport station. Spaceport Station. The launch program originated there, and then they built the Kennedy Space Center back in the 60s. One is run by the Air Spaceport, the other is a civilian army division. This guy ahead of you, this is how Manatee died. Because this is a no wake zone. Close to the shore. For a reason.
The Coast Guard Patrol.
Not enough Coast Guard control here. But they catch you, yeah, but there's generally not enough resources for these Coast Guard. He's a fisherman, he should know better. So you see the VAB up there, large building, that's Kennedy Space Center. That's where we launched the shuttles, and where eventually the Artemis project will start launching again. That's the project to go back to the moon and Mars. They have their next test flight, SLS flight, in I think July. Next test flight. Other than the manned launches, which have flown out of there, so the Dragon capsule, the SpaceX Dragon capsule, is flown off the old shuttle pads, 39A and B. Everything else, virtually everything else, is launched out of the Air Force Station. Well, the Atlas rockets, the unmanned SpaceX flights, later we've got a couple other small companies launching dropping their slab, orbital science. And then we have Blue Origin up north, who's still building and coming online. They're going to fire their new Glenn rocket from here. That's Jeff Bezos. He's got the new rocket, the new Glenn is going to be a tourist rocket. He hasn't flown one yet. Well, some test flights, but nothing real yet. I don't know if these or not. That's going to be.
There's a launch scheduled Sunday.
Yes. Sunday is the next launch, I think. So we're going to come back in this channel. It's going to take us 20-25 minutes to get back home. You got the red markers on the right, green on the left. That's our deep channel. And up here on our right is what we call the flats. It's all very shallow. And then where the red markers are is where it drops off of the channel. That difference in depth is quite big. It's a couple feet to 6, 7, 8, 10 feet. That's where the bait fish tend to be, along that depth change. And if the dolphin are feeding, or mom is showing her baby how to feed, this is where we're going to see them. There's a very good chance we'll see some more dolphin along through here. The ones we saw up on the flats kind of is a good sign that they're around. Just a matter of where exactly are they. We'll get clear of the bridge here and you'll have a better view of the Space Center and Port Canaveral to our left. I don't see any ships in, So this Port Canaveral to our left, the building we were talking about earlier that has the FBM museum and all that, is that white structure there that's kind of funny top on it. That's the Verizon building. Then the white building's farther to the left, way over here on the left. That's normally where the Disney Cruise Line is. There's a parking lot there. The ships right now are all staying offshore. They're anchored offshore because they have to pay port charges when they're in. So they come in periodically. They drop off trash, change crew, things like that. But because of COVID, they're staying offshore until they start running again. I don't know. The skeleton crew, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it was only 10 or 15 people. I don't know, 20. Some of the bigger ships. Right. Get the anchor down, keep out the way, cook meals. Okay, so normally we have 8 cruise ships here, the home port here. And actually Port Canaveral is the second busiest port in the world. It's set second in the country, second to Miami. Miami's the biggest and largest. Port Canaveral is the second busiest port, with 4.5 million passengers a year to Port Canaveral up until last year. And about 6.5 million tons of cargo. With Disney Cruise Lines, Carnival, Norwegian, Holland America. There's a couple others, and there's a couple gambling ships there that are running now. If you want to go out on a gambling ship, you can do that. They go out in the afternoon. They go out for about 4 hours, I think. You can gamble and then have some food. They take you out 3 miles out. Port Canaveral is not man-made. It's not not a natural ocean inlet. I mentioned the 2 that we have. Beyond those 2, about an hour south there is Sebastian Inlet, open to the ocean. That's a shallow inlet though, so it's not a deep water inlet. So it's part of our lagoon, but it's not the extent of the lagoon. And then Port Canaveral is man-made. It was actually dug out in the 40s and opened in the 50s to provide access to the Atlantic Ocean. And then also along Merritt Island, on top of Merritt Island, is a place called the Barge Canal, connects the port with the Intercoastal Waterway. Where's our dolphin? You guys saw it? Oh, right there, Bill. Yep, good. Go there. Watch for we got to stay this side of the red mark, but hopefully it'll be close enough. Maybe they'll hang around and we'll see what they're doing. George is another one off to the left. You can't tell if they're individuals or pods.
There's no sun now.
Right down too far left in front of the red. It's not too long. There's another around here somewhere.
Good.
Is it the boat?
Maybe. Here's another one straight ahead. It went out the back. There's another one coming up. I think it was up over here somewhere. Right there.
Another small pod. Like 2 individuals, a baby. Actually, they're very smart, but they do have to learn. Animals, they don't do that in snakes. Shark. So they have to learn how to be a dolphin, where to go with, eat, how to behave, hang out with. Mom teaches them, it takes a couple years. It took me probably 8 years. Maybe it might do it all 8 years.
Coming back.
It's still not right. But it's a bargain. It's not really. But they're very, very smart. They're actually experimenting. There's a scientific quotient that measures
Go sit
the
back
brain's
down.
Okay.
Man is the smartest. We would argue that, but man is the smartest based on brain size. The second is the great apes, the primates, and the dolphin is the third. Very, very smart. They behave like us in many ways. I already mentioned their proclivities, I should say. They also are known to like to get high. You can look that up on YouTube. They're known to enjoy their time. What they do is they use puffer fish. Puffer fish to they see the predator kind of himself up, makes himself bigger than he is. But he also releases toxins, neurotoxins. That's very the dolphins know that. They know that puffer fish that they play in the toxins to get high. They're known to do that, it doesn't play. So much so they kind of enjoy it. They'll make the puffer fish, they'll pass it to the other dolphin and play with it. And toss it back and play. You can watch it on the YouTube channel, look up drunk dolphin or something like that, and you'll see them playing with puffer fish and getting intoxicated. Whether they do that on purpose or part of their learning regimen, I'm not sure, but they do seem to like it. On purpose? Oh, man. Heard that, they do that on purpose. They've also learned how to eat octopus. You ever try to eat a live octopus? It's really hard. It sticks right to you, you know? Something out of the alien movies. Well, the dolphins learn how to do that. They'll jump up, they slap their head in the water, gets the octopus off, and they keep slapping it senseless until they can eat it. So they've learned how to do that. I'm going to remember that joke. That's mine now. If they do it on purpose. Yeah, I could use that. Yeah. It's even a free, huh? No royalties? Royalties to use this joke. Breeze is chilly. We haven't seen any egrets. I'm surprised.
What's that?
Nothing. At the same time. Give it something to think.
Yeah.
Listen to this too. Yeah.
Birds are all starting to settle on the water. It's getting chillier out. They do that because the water temperature is warmer than the air temperature. They stay close to the water. That's Cape Canaveral Hospital. Make sure you keep all your body parts in, your hands, your fingers, elbows. Make sure you keep it in. For the smaller children in particular, hold them tight or have them hold the bench in front of them just in case we jostle around and bang around a little bit going in there. Again, thank you for coming. Hope you enjoy your stay here. If you're traveling home, be safe. Take care. You enjoy the snow when you get home. Okay. And if you're looking for something to do or a place to go and you want a recommendation, one of us might be able to help you too. Feel free to ask.
Yeah. It's getting later in the day. Yeah.
With the sun, maybe the sun was.
I got it.
Right.
Give us a thumbs up if you liked our video, and please subscribe by clicking the circle with our pictures on it. Thank you.